Guys, we're here to talk about how do you staff your church during a pandemic. And the thing about DWC is we're here to try to help pastors to find out exactly what they can do in light of the fact that we have all been shut in America, really around the world. And as worship leaders, we have ideas and we have proven solutions that we know that will work for these churches. And even beyond that, DWC being a ministry-minded group, being a ministry-minded company, there are things we can do. We've talked about this, and we want pastors to understand that when they sign on with us, we're going to defer their invoices for 4 weeks. And there's a reason why we do that. And we'll talk about why we're doing that. There are pastors who are anxious right now because their offerings are low. I've talked to some pastors personally. Their offerings are low. They're really down 60%. Some of them down 60% of what they normally would get. So that's having to make them make some more decisions. So how do you staff someone during this pandemic? Jeff, the thing I'm seeing about pastors is the fact that they feel like alone sometimes. How do you think we can help them in that situation?
I really think we need to pray for these pastors as they're dealing with these boards. Some of them are elder boards, some of them are just leadership boards, some of them are deacon boards, church councils. In the Methodist church I'm working with right now, they call it the SPRC council that's over them. And they need to have somewhat of some bravery right now to talk to those groups and those leadership councils. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it very positively, that we need to pray that they'll have wisdom and boldness to be able to go to them and say, listen, we need to spend these funds to not only keep the staff we have, but to fill this position so that we can go forward.
John, you work in a church. How is it going for your church personally, and how are things happening with church there in Alabama?
I mean, it's a different day as it is for everybody, and it's easy to feel alone, like you're on a deserted island. Thankful for networks like this and companies like this. For me personally, that I can reach out to. We're having staff meetings by Zoom once a week, just for accountability, but also to encourage each other. I have friends, as God lays on my heart, that I call just to say, how are you doing? It's just a time for the church to be the church. It's not about the building. I think we're seeing a new day and a new time. And so we need to really go to God, as Jeff has said, and not only pray for each other, but pray for God to give us vision about what he wants us to do in the next step. And a lot of us don't know what that is, but we're trusting him. We're never alone. Wherever we go, he's already been, as the word says. And so I'm excited about the days ahead for us.
When people start coming back to church needs to be fresh, okay? And if you've not had a worship leader as a pastor and you've been looking for a while, this is a great time to find a worship leader so that when the people come back, they're excited. They got a new worship leader, new guy.
I have, been in the process of placing a worship pastor in a church during this time. It's not just talk. It's not something that, we're trying to reach out to these pastors and say, hey, we feel like we can make it happen. No, we have already made it happen. So to give pastors, during this time, the encouragement, and the idea that this isn't just something that we're trying to make happen for you. We want to make that happen, and we can. Even taking it a step further, we are making it happen. There's a church in West Virginia that I have worked with, and am placing a worship pastor in that church as we speak, even during this time. So this isn't just something that we're, encouraging pastors that we can do. This is something that we are doing. And that's, two different perspectives when it comes to, what we would like to do, or what we can do, or what we are doing.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you're actually placing that candidate? Because I know right now you're having to do some interesting things to get that person in front of the pastor, in front of the committee, in front of the people and the board and the voting process. So how's some of that happening with the church you're working with in West Virginia?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because this kind of goes back to what we've been talking about all along, is that even as you know, Dwight Whitworth and Company, and Dwight, me and you have talked about this, is that we're even having to evolve in this time as far as looking at new ways of doing things that we haven't done. And so, you know, not only are we encouraging pastors and churches to do that, we're doing that ourselves, even with this. And there's conversations, you know, Jeff, you and I have had, and Dwight, we've looked at it, you know, as far as how are we going to be able to make this happen in a time where we're social distancing, you know, where we're not being able to make this happen. And so we've continued to, you know, do our process. And as far as the church I'm working with, I've had the video conferences with the candidate, with the pastor, with the candidate and the staff, you know, moving this thing along. And we're even looking at doing, you know, with them, a modified, what we call pilot service weekend, where we bring in the couple and allow them to go to the place where the church is in West Virginia, you know, being careful of again, the times that we're living in, and allowing them to go in and meet the pastor, you know, do some things online, whether it's Zoom, watching this person and the candidate, you know, lead from his guitar, you know, lead from the stage actually at the church, and allow the pastor and them to do the things that we would normally do on a pilot service weekend, just in a modified way. And so again, we're doing this process and continuing this, so that as soon as this comes out, this church has their worship leader, they're moving in, and they're making it happen regardless of what we're experiencing.
So that's kind of where we are with the church I'm working with in Indiana. We're in this process right now where we're using Zoom to meet with the candidate and the pastor. Tonight, actually, we meet with the pastor, the candidate, and their spouses. So we're continuing this process, and we've already begun that thought process, like you're doing there, Matt, with the church in where was it? I'm sorry.
West Virginia.
West Virginia, right? In West Virginia, where we're thinking creatively about how do we, you know, if this goes on over the next couple of days, like we think it's going to go, and how we're praying for it to go, where there's a really good match here, then how do we get our candidate there to the church? Maybe there's a scaled down acoustic set that he leads one Sunday with their band. There's just 3 or 4 people there, but he could go ahead and lead a pilot service, a worship weekend with their team, but just only have a few people there, so we're careful not, you know, with the regulations.
Getting through a horribly, you know, difficult time on, you know, anything that we've ever experienced, and coming out on the other side of, you know, hiring a worship pastor, something that, and was capable of doing that during this time. And if I'm a pastor, I still have to do my job. And if I'm thinking about this, I'm saying, wow, I just hit a home run. And how exciting would that be to my people, that not only from a ministerial standpoint, but from a business standpoint, I was capable of, you know, looking at a company, having them help us out from a ministerial standpoint. And when we came out of this, you know, this is, you know, something that the church people and the congregation people are going to look at me and say, wow, you know, he really has, you know, made this thing happen even during a difficult time. So Jimmy, what would you, you know, what would your mindset be, you know, thinking about that standpoint from, you know, being the pastor, the head guy in charge, you know, how is it that, you know, as I like to say, your report card is going to come out once all this is over with?
Well, as a pastor, we don't always have to do it ourselves. That's the thing. I think so many times when you think of doing your job, you're actually hands-on doing it by yourself, solo. And I'm bad about that. Instead of looking around me and saying, who can help me with this? And, you know, sometimes pastors have a hard time just even allowing their staff to do their job, much less bringing in a company like Dwight Whitworth and say, let us help you do your job. When you're helping me, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're personally doing the work hands-on. You've provided the resource by which things can happen for me to be able to exist and to take care of me physically. by bringing in people, by using the resources around you. And Dwight Whitworth and Consultants is just that. It is a resource, and it's a wise pastor who will say, look, this is a way I can let somebody come and walk alongside us and say, you know, I can give credence to them, and God can work in that situation.
We are poised to be in a greater position, a greater awakening than we have ever been in my lifetime. For when the church building opens back up, I think people are going to come for community. We've got to be prepared for that. We've got to quit looking at why we can't do things and be prepared to be in a position to where when they come back, it's greater than it ever was before.
What does God want us to glean from this? We've got to do something different than we've normally done it. So why don't we look ahead? Why don't we plan for whenever this thing, we come out of the tunnel, I say. I use the phrase, we're coming out of the tunnel. And it's going to be a long tunnel to come out of, but if we can somehow convey to churches, you need to be in a planning mode right now and envisioning where you're going with this after this is over.
We can't get into the idea where we get stuck in a place that this is how we've always done it. But, you know, this is a moment where we cannot act that way. And as far as DWC goes and us having, you know, a way to help you out, you cannot be in this moment in time and look at anything like you used to look at it. You know, we're in a difficult time right now. I know you may have, you know, allocated these funds for children's ministry or worship ministry, but we've got to be able to use that for our staff at this time so that we can come out of this thing and still have a staff instead of coming out of this thing and I'm the only person that's left in the building.
What if a pastor is sitting there looking at whether to make a decision on trying to hire somebody right now? What would you tell that pastor when he would ask Dwight, hey, why should I spend the money to do this right now? What advantages am I going to have if I kind of take a chance here in my mind and spend money to hire this worship leader? What would you tell that pastor?
Jeff, one of the things that makes DWC different is the fact that as president, I have pastored as well. And I know in that role, I had so many things to think about. I had to think about what the music was going to be like, if the teachers were going to be there, if the building was going to be maintained itself, if the bills were getting paid, if the offering was going to get there. I had to think about Sunday morning, how I had to, whether I wanted to or not, promote the offering. And, you know, and getting people to give. I had to think about those things. I had to think about on Saturday night, if I was going to have enough people or if the people were going to show up, especially my givers, because we had a big insurance bill coming up. And you see, all these pastors are thinking about these things. And on top of that, they need a worship leader. So what are they going to do? They need somebody like Jimmy was talking about, come alongside of them, who's ministry minded and say, brother, I know how you feel. And I know that you've got all these things going on and you think, hey, we can't afford this. But I'm going to tell you something. Matt brought this up a while ago. In this time of containment, there are line items in our budget. Everybody knows what a line item is, right? The guys who are music leaders, the only thing they're concerned about is that music line item, what's in my budget. But the pastor has to think of the whole thing, you know. So what is my line items? Are there some things in my line items that I can shift to looking for a worship leader? Well, one of the things that pastors don't realize about DWC is the fact you've got already in your budget that salary for your worship leader. And so we work with that salary, and that's how we operate with the pastors. Pastors think we're going to charge them thousands and thousands of dollars like a lot of other companies. So that's what I say to pastors. We understand, we get it. And you can make some shifts, and we come alongside of you, like Jimmy said, and we can help you find your worship leader, even during a time like this, because we're going to defer 4 weeks of your payment. I'm going to do 4 months, but 4 weeks. And so you don't have to worry about that. We're going to be back in church in 4 weeks. We're going to be having the offerings back. So we're ministry minded to that. So let us find you a worship leader while you're not paying. Does that make sense, John?
I love the fact that the way you explained it, there's really, with all the pressures that are on pastors right now, this is really a no pressure thing. There's no, to be able to talk with you or one of us and to come alongside, as Jimmy said, and help you think that way. And I love what Matt said a few minutes ago. The way we've done things in the past aren't necessarily the way we're going to have to do things in the future. So we're going to have to kind of get out of our own way sometimes, I think. And what a fresh breath of fresh air to be able to have a resource like this, a company, Dwight Whitworth and Company, that's doing it unlike anybody else. This is not about business for us. This is about ministry. This is about pairing through the Holy Spirit of God, churches with the pastors, with the right worship pastors that's going to move their church forward. And what a fresh wind, a fresh breath to be able to come alongside and ask questions and get this help and to know, hey, I'm not having to pay anything for 4 weeks. What do I have to lose?
So there are things in our own experiences that churches, even in a good way, that have made decisions and had to face things and had to figure it out in order to be able to move forward, to be able to continue ministry, to be able to do the things that God has always called us to do. And that's a moment in time that we're at, where we all just have to sit down at the table and say, how are we going to do this? How are we going to figure this out? And that's as a company, as DWC, where we want to sit at the table with you and say, this is how you're going to figure this situation out.
Right now on our data sheet, we have over 700 churches who are looking for worship leaders. 700 pastors looking for worship leaders. 700 worship teams looking for worship leaders. Now, somebody's got to help them, and if we can help them, we will. Talking about ministry and working with their budgets and all, we had a church we worked with where church called me and says, we can't pay our bill. And you know what I said? I said, we're ministry minded. We're going to work with you. And we've suspended some of our invoices while we worked with them. We gave pro bono to some of our churches. That makes us different. Makes us different than anybody else. I don't hear about other groups and anybody else doing that. And we're not a 501c3 either. We're not a nonprofit, but we work with churches. And so that's why we want to be able to help 700 churches right now in our database who are looking for. And so that's why we want to be able to help those pastors, those search teams to do and find what they're looking for.
Can you talk to the thought that maybe a pastor or a team would say, is anybody willing to move right now? Is anybody willing to accept our offer right now? Because I actually found that there were a lot of people willing to move right now and willing to accept jobs.
The candidate that I'm working with that is out of Texas and the pastor and the church and the staff that's in West Virginia, they're both sitting on pins and needles, ready for this to happen. They're both excited. The candidate and his family has gone through a lot of things in the last year and months, and they're excited to be a part of a new place, and the church, the pastor that I'm working with is unbelievably excited, as you can imagine. I'm sure he was the type, just like a lot of pastors are out there, that was wondering, man, we're getting ready to go into this pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen. There's no way that I'm going to be able to get a worship pastor during this time. And we were able to do that for him. So I can only imagine from his heart and his spirit how exciting it was that, the things that are happening in the world has not stopped what we're able to do for him as a church, for him as a pastor, for the candidate and his family to be excited about the fact that none of this has hampered anything from the standpoint of a family, a husband, a wife. They have 3 kids. They're excited about going somewhere. You have a pastor that's a person that has a family, that is wondering about his staff and his church and praying for them. And how exciting is it for all of those people that I just talked about, that we were able to accomplish what we've been accomplishing now for as long as DWC has been around, that this pandemic that we're a part of hasn't affected anything as far as our process goes in pairing a worship pastor with a great church and a pastor. And when all of this is said and done, it's just like what Dwight was saying just a minute ago. Their church is going to be excited. They're going to come in, and the first Sunday there, it's like, wow, even from the standpoint of not only being excited that we're able to worship together again, but wow, we have a new worship pastor who's leading us in worship, a new family that's part of our family now, and we're going to continue moving forward as a church like none of this has ever happened before.
It's hard for me to talk about what God's done for me without getting a little tearful. And when I see churches, and I mean this in the kindest of ways, but when I see them not thinking very clearly during some times like this, when they really need help, but either they're afraid to ask for the help, or they're embarrassed to ask for the help, or they just feel like that's my job, and I don't feel like I should give that up. My heart goes out to them, because so many times we've seen this, all of us, where a church just ends up trying to do something on their own, and they can't find that person as effectively as we could. And they end up settling for God's second, third, maybe even fourth best, right? And that just breaks my heart. I mean, Joe Pace was one of our worship leaders at Integrity Music, and he talks about the only place where we settle for second best so many times is in the church. And that's a sad statement. We're here to give our very best. The best musicians in town should be at the local church, not the local bar. The best thing that we can offer should be at the church,
I think the best church staffing group in America right now is Red Letter Jobs out of Atlanta. And they have churches that will list their job descriptions on there, hoping that somebody will look at that and say, I think I'll apply. And so that those 40 or 50 people that apply, they got to choose which one of those 40 or 50 people are going to apply. Now, if my auto mechanic is on that committee, and my auto mechanic is going to make a decision about who's going to be the worship leader, he doesn't need to be working on cars, does he? He needs to be working for DWC. When the churches start doing reconstruction, they have these guys come in to give them quotes and proposals, and they look at the proposals and the quotes. And 9 times out of 10, there is nobody on that committee who says, why don't we just put that roof on ourselves?
Right.
Why don't we just build that new addition? Let's get all of our church members to do it. It's because they don't have time, they don't have the skill, and they don't have the energy to get it done. That's why we are here for people. That's why we can do it for churches.
I know we need to wrap this thing up. It's getting long. But one of my frustrations with even secular businesses and companies, why is it that people and our people personnel resources are the first things we get rid of? Rather than selling a tractor, or rather than waiting a while to put a roof on that building, we'll get rid of our people. I never have understood that concept.
Yeah.
Because aren't the people what actually make our ministry more effective? Look at any college football, look at any athletic team, and the coach makes such a difference. Okay, and we could all name examples right now of a team that was led by one person one year. The next year, the new guy comes in, and the team explodes in success. Okay, that's leadership. Yeah. So without leadership, we have nothing.
We're in a stalemate right now of just feeling like we can't move forward. We don't have a play, and we need to redeem that time, because God has given us a gift, and it's called time. So 5 things I want to bring out. And one is, use this as a vision seeking process, as a time where we seek God and leadership, and using our minds and prayers to seek vision for the future. The second thing is to use our leadership is to encourage the pastors and to use their leadership influence to look ahead and to know that God is in the process. The third thing is to look around us and to see the resources that are available. I'm the first one to say, I don't have to have the best idea, but I know a good idea when I hear one. And to see DWC as a resource and to see that as an opportunity that God has given them to help them in their ministry. And the fourth is leadership is not doing it yourself. It's looking around you and seeing the best person or persons or resource that God has put in your lap to get that job done. And the last thing is God honors the faithful prayers of his people. God is not only in the past, God is in the present, and God is in the future. And if we believe that, we need to act on it, encourage them to act on it now so that they're ready for the future.
Good job. Good points. Guys did a great job today. And, we just want to help those guys who are looking for somebody during this time. And I think we've hit on a lot of good highlights. Jimmy did a lot of good summary there. And we want to be able to help pastors and churches find the precise worship leader they're looking for, even in a time like this. And I want to encourage them. Number one, we can find that person very quickly. Number two, they can afford us during this time. And we can also help find some local guys who would work interim while we're working for them. So I appreciate your time today. And thank you for taking some time. And we believe that God's going to use DWC to help these guys. And these guys are going to be open up to us. And we will be able to help them.